everyone, and welcome back to Tea Time Thoughts. I'm Kaylin, as always, and in case you couldn't tell by how congested I sound, I've gotten sick again. I was just sick. I got sick a couple weeks ago with a really bad cold and congestion and stuff, and I had a few weeks where I could freely breathe through both nostrils, and now I'm sick again. Do y'all ever sometimes feel like the universe is just after you? Because I do. Anyway, how are y'all doing? I'm suffering. Thanks for asking. I'll be fine. I just need to keep taking some vitamin C. But today, it's probably good that I am a bit frustrated with my sickness because I'm talking about something that kind of frustrates me today. So today I'm going to be talking about the 2021 blockbuster film Spencer, directed by Pablo Larraín, written by Stephen Knight, and starring Kristen Stewart. Okay, so just to go ahead and introduce you guys to the movie, Spencer is based off of the real-life figure Princess Diana Spencer, a member of the English nobility who famously married Charles, the Prince of Wales, in 1981. She was known for being the mother of Princes William and Harry, for her humanitarian and charity works, for her controversial divorce from Charles, and her tragic death in 1997 from a car crash. And before you get excited, we're not going to touch any of the conspiracies surrounding her death. We're going to let her rest in peace. So put your tinfoil hats away. Now that I've given you the refresher on Diana, we can get into the synopsis of the film. So Spencer stars Kristen Stewart as Princess Diana, and Spencer is categorized as a historical fiction / psychological drama. The film is set during Christmas in 1991, and the royal family have gathered at the Queen's Sandringham estate in Norfolk. Diana, over the course of the holiday weekend, struggles with her situation as both an outsider of the royal family and as somebody who's trapped inside the confines of royal life and an unhappy and suffocating marriage. She's forced to make a decision for her own sake to try and keep hiding everything or to free herself. Now, that's the spoiler-free edition. If you would like to avoid having anything spoiled for you, now would be a good time to tap out and you can come back after you've watched it. For those of you that have seen it or are going to continue listening anyway, strap in because we're in for a doozy. And I'll get into that after this.
This episode is brought to you by Our Weird World. Every week, I, John Henson, dive into weird, crazy, and forgotten stories from the history books that you have probably never heard before. I try to put some humor into it, or maybe I just come off sounding like a dick. That's really up for you to decide. But join me every Monday. Subscribe everywhere that you get your podcasts.
And now, back to the story. Now, I'm just going to kind of guide us through the plot of the movie in some more detail, but I will give a content warning. This story does involve mentions of eating disorders, self-harm, and suicide attempts. So if this is something that you find upsetting or something that makes you uncomfortable, please feel free to skip this episode because it's not worth ruining your day over this. And I know I've said that in some episodes before, but seriously, this movie is not worth ruining your day. Just do whatever's going to be best for you. Okay, so the movie opens with the phrase, a fable based on a true tragedy. So we understand that there's an artistic license being taken with the story, especially considering that it's a story that the public likely knows well. So the movie opens with some military-grade vehicles delivering food to Sandringham Estate, and then once the guard leaves, the kitchen staff all sweep in and start organizing themselves in the kitchen. Meanwhile, our protagonist, Diana, is driving to the estate and gets horribly lost along the way. So she pulls into a small fish and chip shop / petrol station for directions. And then she pulls up near a field and finds a scarecrow that had her dad's old coat on it. So she runs through the field, takes the coat off, and brings it with her. By the time Diana arrives, the royal family has already gotten to the palace, and Diana is left to do the weighing tradition that the family does each year, where they weigh themselves to see how much weight they gained during Christmas, and therefore can kind of see how much fun they had during Christmas. But this is obviously not fun for Diana, who struggles with an eating disorder, and everyone seems to know this, but they insist that she does it anyway. Afterwards, we see Diana purging her food into a toilet and then reminding herself and the audience that she only has to be there for 3 days. Which is actually about how long this movie feels. Then Diana runs into her old and beloved maid Maggie, who she asks to fix up her father's coat. Then Diana is seen chatting with her sons William and Harry, and she tells them that there is no future when it comes to the royal family. The past and present are the same thing. And then the family opens their Christmas presents, and Diana receives a pearl necklace, but it turns out that Diana's husband, Charles, who they haven't said his name, but come on, we know it's him, gave her the exact same pearl necklace that he gave to his mistress Camilla, whose name we also haven't heard, but again, come on, We know it's her. Diana then finds a book written about Anne Boleyn left by her bedside, and she talks to the mannequin where her coat is hung up, and she very explicitly explains the metaphor for us, that the Spencers were related to the Boleyns and how Henry VIII killed his wife because he wanted another woman to be queen, and naturally Diana relates to the situation. She then gets dressed, and all of her clothes read an acronym POW. For Princess of Wales or Prisoner of War. It's up for you to decide. She then opens up to her maid Maggie about all of her frustrations and her thoughts, and Maggie strives to tell Diana to hang in there, that she can do it. Diana then goes to dinner and feels the eyes of everyone watching her. The queen is watching. Her unfaithful and neglectful husband is watching. Anne Boleyn is just eating soup at the table and staring at her. I know this was supposed to be serious, but it just looked so out of place. And the second time when I was rewatching the movie for this review, I just almost laughed. Like, it was just so, like, not even on the nose, like straight up in your nose, like through your nostrils. Oh my gosh, it was just so in your face. It was ridiculous. Like, come on. Ugh. Anyway, so at dinner, Diana imagines herself ripping off her pearls and eating them. You did not hear me wrong. The pearls fall into her soup and she eats them. She then throws up in the bathroom, and we see that the pearls are, in fact, actually still around her neck. Later, when the kitchen's empty, Diana goes into the fridge and eats some of the food, and one of the members of staff, named Major Gregory, goes into the fridge as well and speaks with her, and we have something of our antagonist of the movie, or at least he's kind of supposed to be. I don't know. For me personally, I just saw him as a man trying to do his job. So he's basically the watchman for the family to ensure that not too much attention is being attracted. He rebukes Diana for getting changed with the curtains open, and Diana spits back another Anne Boleyn metaphor at him, and she then goes outside because she wants to go past the gate to her old family house, which is just across the way, but she's caught by the guards, and when they say they'll have to report her, she asks them not to, which the guards say into their radios that nothing's happened, but later in the movie, we hear people bring it up anyway, so it really didn't matter. Then she wakes up William and Harry to have a late night chat with them, and I think this was supposed to be their sentimental ticket of the movie, but the premise of the scene just kind of bothered me. Like, don't get me wrong, there definitely was some sweetness to it. It was very touching to see the relationship between brothers and mom and sons, but okay, so Diana calls William and Harry together, and she's playing a game where they're basically pretending that they're military personnel, where she's the major and they're the soldiers, and she's asking them what they want for Christmas, or like what they like most about Christmas, and what's the game? They're just speaking like soldiers. They're just doing impressions. Like, what's the objective here? What's the game? Because they call it a game in the movie. Am I missing something? What's the game? Harry says it's silly, and William's like, oh, you're just saying that because you're hopeless at it. Like, how can you be hopeless at it? You're just talking. Are you telling me you're bad at talking? Come on. And then she asks her sons to tell her if she's acting strange, which it's sweet that she can confide in her sons like that, but I also feel bad for the kids that they have to have that kind of responsibility, because that's a lot to have to take on when you're young. The next day, Christmas morning, Diana finds out that Maggie has been sent away, and she has a different dresser now, and Diana requests to have Maggie brought back. Diana then rebels by wearing the outfits out of order of what they were assigned. She wears the title poster red outfit with the black hat and veil to the Christmas church ceremony, even though it was meant for Boxing Day. And we see that Camilla, the mistress, has shown up to the church. The royal family is also plagued by photographers, and then back at the house, Diana dreams of Anne Boleyn, and I will give them props for using Anne's own poem that she wrote before her death, but I'd give them more props if they would have been more subtle about this stupid metaphor. William is learning how to shoot with Charles, but he's not quite getting into it, and he doesn't really want to shoot. And he especially doesn't want to have to shoot pheasants, which they're supposed to do the next day, but Charles is insistent upon him learning. Diana sides with William, worrying for his safety. And then we have the momentous scene from the pool table, where from Diana's side, we have 4 balls representing herself, probably the cook, Darren, Maggie, and then the other ones possibly either William or Anne. But then Charles has all the red balls on his side in a very neat and uniform order, showing that he has the advantage of being in the tightly knit confines of the royal family. He tells Diana that she basically needs to split herself into 2 and hide her true self from the public eye. He also says you have to make your body do things that you hate, which obviously implies how he truly felt about Diana and their marriage. He also tells her that Maggie left because she basically said that Diana was crazy, which obviously really hurts Diana because she trusts Maggie. Diana then goes to talk to the Queen, and the Queen tells her that all they really are is currency. And thus we have our next metaphor for the rest of the movie. Diana then talks to Darren, Darren and asks what will happen to the pheasants, and Darren says that the pheasants will be shot and then served to dinner, and the leftovers will be thrown out. Diana then tells Darren that she saw Anne Boleyn, but Darren warns her that she needs to be careful because everything she says becomes, you guessed it, currency among the staff. Diana then asks for a pair of wire cutters, and later she goes out in the garden and chats with the pheasant, but Major Gregory runs into her and then tries to tell her a long story about a military friend who told him a story about a wild horse, but the friend was shot before he could finish the story, and Diana says she hopes that the horse was never tamed, but Gregory asks her to just try and adhere to the family schedule. When she comes back inside, Diana realizes that her curtains have been sewn shut, and then after she dresses into her Christmas dress, she takes the wire cutters to cut the curtain open. After she opens the curtains and gets a glimpse of the outside, she then cuts herself in the arm with wire cutters and locks herself in the bathroom. William tries to convince her to come to dinner, but she doesn't relent and goes on to call Camilla Jane Seymour. And then Maggie comes into the bathroom, but Diana realizes that she's hallucinating and it's not actually Maggie, it's the other maid. So she then sees Anne Boleyn running down the hall out of the estate, and she follows her. And at one point she's even dressed like Anne Boleyn. And it's too much, y'all. I can't. But so Diana goes over to her old house using the wire cutters and breaking her way in, and she sees how dilapidated. They're coming to arrest me for my bad opinions. So Diana goes over to her old house and uses the wire cutters and breaks her way in. And she sees how dilapidated her old home is, and some of the stairs nearly give way under her feet when she's walking up. And she makes her way to her old childhood rooms, and we see a flashback of her life. And she then goes back to the staircase and contemplates throwing herself down the stairs. But Anne Boleyn speaks to her and stops her, convincing her to tear off the pearls and run away from the life that she's trapped in. And back at the old house, Diana rips the pearls off and lets them tumble down the stairs. The next morning when she wakes up, Maggie is there by her bedside, for real this time. Diana and Maggie then drive out to a beach, and Diana asks Maggie if she said that she had actually been cracking up. And Maggie confesses that she's actually been in love with Diana, but doesn't actually answer Diana's question. Like, okay, good job, Maggie, you got out of that one. Meanwhile, the royal family is preparing for the pheasant hunt, and Diana goes to stop it. On the way, she tells Maggie that they are all currency and that she loves the simple middle-class life and she wasn't made out for the royal lifestyle. Then she swaps out one of her dresses and puts it on the scarecrow where her father's coat previously was. Then she walks out towards the firing, and everybody immediately stops shooting, and she demands that her sons be allowed to leave with her. Charles lets the boys leave, and they all run off together. They grab their belongings from the house and leave, but not before hopping on the scale, all three of them together, which I actually really liked that part. I thought that was very sweet. Then Diana opens the glove box to her car to get the key out, and she sees that Maggie's left her a note that reads, "It's not just me who loves you." We also see Major Gregory putting the book about Anne Boleyn back on the shelf. Diana drives off with the boys and goes to a KFC drive-thru where they ask for a name, and Diana gives them the name Spencer, which is supposed to be one of those moments where it's like, oh wow, they said the name of the movie, but why do you need to give your name in a drive-thru? Like, they've never asked for my name before in a drive-thru. At least, I don't think that's a thing people do. I don't really know why that was necessary. But anyway, so then they're sitting on a bench overlooking Tower Bridge and the Thames River, and we finally see Diana smile. And that's the end. Okay, now for my rants. These were my notes that I took immediately after I saw the movie for the first time. And I'll get into that after this.
Question. In Pixar's Toy Story, the carpet in Sid's house comes from what movie? Hi, I'm Brian Rollins, host and creator of the Dorky, Geeky, Nerdy Trivia Podcast. Every week, I bring you 30 new trivia questions on a different topic. We've covered Star Wars, Star Trek, Harry Potter, comic books, movies, and so much more. Every episode is designed to be played like your own personal game of Jeopardy or pub trivia. We offer 3 rounds of 10 questions each. Each round is harder than the last. You can play along solo or with a group of friends. We even have scorecards you can use at our website, dorkygeekynerdy.com. Are you a dork, a geek, or a nerd? Maybe a combo of all 3? Well, here's your chance to find out. Join me every Wednesday for new trivia. You can find us at dorkygeekynerdy.com or on just about any podcast directory. Just search for Dorky, Geeky, Nerdy and you'll find the show. Oh, the answer to my question was The Shining. The carpet in Sid's house was inspired by the flooring in the Overlook Hotel. I hope to see you soon at Dorky, Geeky, Nerdy. Thanks.
And now, back to the story. Okay, so obviously I didn't like this movie, but I'll address some of the different aspects of it. So, the music in the movie was a big issue for a lot of people because there were some jazz scores to it, which I didn't really mind that as much. The movie actually in the beginning started out feeling very beautiful, but it ended up playing in a cacophony of sort of stressful and clashing sounds that would keep the audience on edge. And it's fitting because it represents the descent into madness that you might feel when you're spiraling or when your mental state isn't in a good place. And at the beginning of the movie, I was really just trying to lean into things that I usually like about movies. And if you have a score with violins or pianos, I'm easy to please. And at first I was like, oh, okay, nice. And then I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of stressful, which is, it's fitting for the movie because in a way it's representative of Diana's character in the film. There's this beauty to it, but there's an underlying urgency and panic. And I will say though, the second time I watched this movie, I watched it on double speed because I couldn't put myself through watching it all again the same way. And the opening track sounded a bit like a Pac-Man game, and that just made me smile. And then next, just one of the biggest things in the movie is just it's dripping with symbolism, but not always in the best ways. So one of the biggest symbols that we have in the movie is the pearl necklace, and it's a bit of a tighter fitting necklace, so it's almost a bit like a collar or a choker. And the irony of this necklace being identical to the one that Camilla has is very thick because pearls usually represent a symbol of virtue. They were actually a favorite of Queen Elizabeth I. But definitely one of the more disturbing scenes of the film is the scene where Diana first imagines ripping off her necklace and her pearls falling into the soup. And she just takes a bite and you hear the pearl cracking between her teeth, and it's just, yeah. Ugh. And I kind of interpreted this as maybe Diana being forced to swallow the truth of her situation, and that's something actually needed to be done. But we get another scene later where she actually rips the pearls off down the stairs when she's in the ruins of her own home. And I just think it would have been more effective to have had only one instance where she had ripped off the pearls, because by the time that it happens in the climax of the movie, it just feels like a habit rather than something powerful. But yeah, carrying on with the lack of subtlety in the metaphors and symbolism, we're told outright that Diana views herself as Anne Boleyn. We aren't even left to make that connection on our own. It's like the people who made the movie didn't trust us to figure it out ourselves, so they had to be upfront about it. Another metaphor we see a lot is in Diana's desire to escape the grounds of Sandringham Castle to the ruins of her past childhood home. And it's easy to guess that this probably indicates Diana's longing to escape to a time that was simpler and happier. And as we mentioned before, there's the recurring theme of people being currency. And it just calls into question what people are actually worth. Who owns us? Are we just being passed around from hand to hand? And it's an interesting metaphor, but again, every time I just heard the word currency being used, I was like, oh gosh, here we go again. And another theme is the complaint of how cold the house is and how Diana and her sons can't quite seem to get warm enough. And it seems pretty obvious that it represents how cold the other members of the royal household are. But it just got to the point where I was so sick of having it all just shoved directly down my face. But there were some subtle parts that I really enjoyed, like the symbolism of the placement in the paintings in the dining room. Like you have Henry VIII with Jane Seymour on top of Anne Boleyn. And there was also a glimpse of George III in the mirror, who was famously known as being the Mad King of England. We also have constant reminders of the public and people listening in and watching at all times. It serves to create this feeling of suffocation. There's a very telling sign in the kitchen that reads, "Keep noise to a minimum, they can hear you," which creates this very Orwellian feeling of constantly being watched, as Diana would have been under the scrutiny of the royal family and by the public, who are just desperate to know all the intimate details of her life. Another thing that stands out is when Diana rushes to take her sons away from the peasant hunt. She's wearing a coat with colors that are very similar to those of the birds that are being shot, which indicates Diana herself is somewhat prey to the members of the royal family and the household. So little touches like those I did like, because it was subtle. It was something I had to stop and think about. You'd be amazed what people can pick up on when you're not telling them what they're supposed to think. And as far as acting review, a lot of people are saying Kristen Stewart's going to get an Oscar for this role. But I honestly thought her performance was a bit one-dimensional. Like, Stewart's performance felt like 2 hours of somebody doing an impression of Princess Diana, and I couldn't really fully get immersed into the story. It felt like when in doubt, she would just kind of tilt her head to the side and look up And she did look like Diana. I definitely will give that to her, but I couldn't really suspend my disbelief enough. And y'all, they did my boy Jack Farthing so dirty. I was so stoked to see that he was going to be playing Charles because Jack Farthing is a very talented actor. I loved him as George in Poldark because he's able to play a very intricate character where you could absolutely hate him, but then have moments where you truly pity him and understand where he's coming from. But most of what he does is just kind of sit and look with a very direct stare, aside from his most prominent scene at the pool table, but it's mostly just him looking upset and like he might have smelled something bad. And I had originally had high hopes for this movie. It looked like something I would have been interested in, but the movie was portrayed in trailers to look almost more like a biopic, so people weren't really expecting this more psychological and sometimes horror-esque feelings to the movie. I think it's something that took a lot of people by surprise. And one criticism that people are giving this film a lot is that it's very reminiscent of another film by the same director about Jackie Kennedy, which follows a very similar sort of tale about the impending madness of a woman with a very public life who, behind closed doors, is in a marriage with a man who's notoriously unfaithful. So people are claiming that this is basically the same story, just kind of rehashed, but this time there's more outrage because this story is more recent than that of Jackie Kennedy. It's something that a lot of people still remember very well. And when I went to see this movie, I saw it with people who were on both sides of the spectrum when it came to knowledge of Princess Diana. Some people in my group knew a lot about her. The others only knew kind of what I was able to summarize before the lights went down and the movie started. But people on both sides were just like weren't satisfied with that movie. It's the sort of story that might have been interesting if it was its own story and didn't just rely on you to fill in the gaps yourself. Almost something kind of like Rebecca. If it had been something like that where it had been more fictionalized, it could have been actually quite interesting. But when you pin something like Princess Diana to it, it's bound to get more attention because Diana has been referred to as the most photographed woman in the world. But doing a story about somebody as notable as Princess Diana comes with its own risks too, because you have people that love her and people that hate her. Are you done now? You'll have people that will love Princess Diana and people that will hate her, and there's certainly a line that you have to toe carefully because not only are you dealing with somebody who is real and did exist, but somebody who existed recently. The critical reviews for this movie, though, are just outstanding, but everyone I know, like in real life, that has seen this movie really didn't like it, so it's really up to you to decide what you think of it, but it's going to be a no from me, dog. Just watch season 4 of The Crown instead. All right, that is it for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in and for bearing with me as my body tries to fight off another cold. Here's hoping by next episode it'll be a bit more clear sounding for you guys. If you liked this episode, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, follow. Every platform's a little bit different. Be sure to check out my YouTube and my Instagram at Tea Time Thoughts Podcast. And don't forget to tune in next week when I talk about what life was like in the Middle Ages. And if you wouldn't mind doing me a favor, if you would go to ratethispodcast.com/teatimethoughts and leave me a review, that would be really great. It helps to boost the podcast and helps us to reach other people that would be interested in joining our discussions. And thank you guys again for listening. This is Tea Time Thoughts, and I'll talk to you next time.